The palace was quiet, its towering spires reaching for the stars above. Inside, the corridors gleamed with the light of distant suns, reflecting off the polished marble floors. The queen walked through them, her footsteps echoing softly in the vast, empty hallways. She had been waiting for this moment for weeks. Her thoughts, however, were far from calm. She had heard rumors about the human who had come to their world, but nothing had prepared her for what she was about to witness. The human soldier was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a set of armor that seemed both ancient and advanced at the same time. He was dressed in the finest gear the galaxy had ever seen, a perfect fit for someone who had spent a lifetime on the battlefield. But it was not the armor or his stature that caught the queen's attention. It was something much more personal, the tattoo that marked his back. She had seen this symbol before in the old records of her people. It was an ancient mark, a symbol connected to a peace treaty that had been forged long ago between her people and a now extinct race of beings. That symbol was a key, she realized. It was a key to secrets that had been buried for generations. The queen paused in the doorway, watching the soldier as he donned his armor, unaware of her presence. She noticed the way his fingers brushed against the tattoo as he finished securing the final pieces of his gear. There was something about the gesture, something that made her think he was more than just a soldier. He was a link to something much larger, something ancient. Her heart quickened, and she stepped forward, her cloak trailing behind her. The soldier turned just as she entered the room, his piercing eyes meeting hers. There was no fear in his gaze, only calm, steady determination. His presence was a silent challenge, a statement that he was not just any soldier. He was something far more significant. She could see it in the way he carried himself, the way the weight of history seemed to rest on his shoulders. The queen took a step closer, her voice soft yet firm.
"I see you've come prepared, soldier. But what is it that you carry on your back?"
"What does this tattoo mean?" The soldier hesitated for a moment, his eyes flicking to the door, as if considering whether to tell her the truth. Finally, he sighed, a sound that spoke of years of hardship and war. He pulled off his helmet, his dark hair falling in messy waves around his face. "It's a mark of my ancestors," he said quietly.
A symbol of a pact they made long ago. The queen frowned, her mind racing. She knew the history of her people well.
A pact, a treaty between their ancestors and an enemy race? It was a story that had been lost to time. For centuries, her people had believed that the war they fought had been an unavoidable conflict, one that ended only in the destruction of their enemies. But this tattoo, it suggested there was more to the story than anyone had ever known.
"What pact?"
she asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and suspicion. She had heard whispers, rumors from her advisors, but nothing solid. This human soldier, however, was offering her a glimpse of the past, a past that could change everything. The soldier's expression darkened, and he seemed to gather his thoughts before speaking again. "Long ago, my people and yours fought a war," he began, his voice steady despite the heavy weight of the subject. "The enemy race, an alien species from another galaxy, was merciless.
They nearly wiped us out, but my ancestors..."
They made a deal with them. A deal that ended the war, that saved both our peoples. The queen felt a chill run down her spine. She had always thought the conflict was one-sided, that her people had been the victors. But what this soldier was saying, it was something else entirely. And this tattoo, she trailed off, struggling to find the words. "It's part of this pact?"
"It's a symbol of the peace treaty. My ancestors were the ones who carried it."
The pact allowed both sides to coexist, but it came at a price. The truth of the pact was hidden, buried, until now.
The queen's mind raced. The implications of his words were enormous.
Could it be true? Had her ancestors been part of something far more complicated than the stories she had been told as a child? She was the queen. She knew the weight of history, but she had never heard anything like this before. She looked at the soldier, her gaze unwavering. "Why haven't we heard this story before?" she asked. "Why is this tattoo only now coming to light?" The soldier looked away for a moment, as if struggling with the weight of the past. "Because it was erased," he replied softly. "My people made sure no one remembered the deal. No one remembered the race that nearly destroyed us. They didn't want anyone to know the truth, but that tattoo, it's a reminder. A reminder of a time when peace was possible, and how fragile it truly was." She had never considered the possibility that peace between their peoples might have been forged in such a way. Her entire life had been built on the idea that her people had fought a just war, that they were the righteous victors. Now, standing before the soldier, she was beginning to see that the truth was far more complicated. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you here?" The soldier met her gaze again, his eyes steady and unflinching. "I came because I know the consequences of this tattoo," he said. "I know what it means, and I know that the enemies of peace will stop at nothing to gain control of it. The same factions that nearly destroyed us are still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment." The Queen's mind raced. There were powerful forces in the galaxy, forces that would do anything to control the ancient secrets this tattoo held. And now, those forces were aware that the last living descendant of the peacekeepers had arrived. The soldier before her was not just a warrior. He was the key to an ancient power that could either save or destroy their world.
"I will protect you," the Queen said, her voice firm with resolve.
"We will uncover the truth of this pact together." The soldier gave a slight nod, but there was no joy in it. The burden of history weighed heavily on him, and he knew that the journey ahead would be dangerous. The tattoo was not just a symbol of peace. It was a symbol of an ancient power that could either heal or destroy everything in its path. As the Queen and the soldier stood there, facing each other, the weight of their responsibility settled between them. Neither of them knew what would come next. But one thing was certain. They were now bound together by the past, and the future of their people rested in their hands. The Queen stood tall, her eyes fixed on the soldier, who now seemed even more enigmatic than before. She had always been confident in her leadership, but this new information about the tattoo stirred a sense of doubt within her. She had never imagined that peace could have been forged in such a way. And now, with this human standing before her, the past seemed to blur with the present in ways she couldn't quite understand. "Tell me more," she said, her voice steady despite the whirl of thoughts inside her head.
"You said the truth was hidden. How long have you known about this?" The soldier hesitated for a moment, his gaze flicking to the ground.
"I grew up hearing stories," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "They knew about the pact, but the rest of the world? They don't. The records were destroyed long ago, buried under layers of time and deception." The Queen took a step closer, intrigued. She had lived her entire life thinking her people had always been the victors, that the struggles they faced had been necessary battles for survival. The idea that their ancestors might have made a deal to end a war, and that this soldier's people had been part of it, was a challenge to everything she had ever known. "But why?" she asked, still struggling to grasp the full scope of what he was saying. Why would anyone hide the truth about something as important as this? The soldier seemed to consider the question carefully, and when he spoke again, there was a trace of bitterness in his voice. "Because the truth wasn't convenient? The deal was made to save both our people, but not everyone agreed with it. Some factions believed the peace was a betrayal. They didn't want anyone to know that our enemies weren't completely destroyed. They didn't want to acknowledge that the war ended because of a shared pact, a pact that offered peace, only at a great cost." The Queen frowned, her mind racing. The soldier's words were beginning to paint a much darker picture of the past. If the pact was truly hidden, it meant that some factions might still want to break it. That could lead to even more conflict. She looked down at the soldier's tattoo once again, as if it might offer more answers. but it only left her with more questions. Who are these factions? She asked, her tone more serious now. And why haven't we heard from them before? Are they still a threat? The soldier's expression grew darker. They've been lying in wait, hidden from view. Their power is still out there, and they'll stop at nothing to find this symbol. This tattoo, it's the key. It holds the truth of the pact, the secret of the war that ended. If they learn what it means, they'll use it to reignite the conflict. If this were true, then the galaxy was on the brink of something much worse than she had imagined. The peaceful rule she had fought so hard to build was now at risk. The soldier's words weren't just a warning. They were a call to action. Do you believe these factions are already aware of the tattoo? She asked, trying to stay calm.
They must be,
the soldier replied, his voice urgent.
This tattoo has always been a symbol of power.
It's not just a mark on my skin. It's a beacon. It draws attention, and it's only a matter of time before someone recognizes it for what it is. That's why I had to come here. I needed to find out if the Queen's people knew the truth, and if you could help me protect it. The Queen took a deep breath. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in. There was no turning back now. She could not allow the galaxy to fall back into chaos, not after everything her people had fought for. This soldier, this human, might just be the only hope they had. I will help you, she said, her voice firm. We will uncover the truth, but we must act quickly. If these factions are still out there, then we have to be prepared. We must learn everything about this pact and ensure it never falls into the wrong hands. The soldier gave a sharp nod, his eyes full of resolve.
I'm ready, he said. But we can't do this alone.
We'll need allies. The Queen considered this for a moment.
Allies. Yes.
But who can we trust?
The soldier's gaze turned to the window, his expression distant as if lost in thought.
There are others like me.
People who know the truth, who have been keeping the secret of the pact alive. We may need to find them. The Queen's mind was already turning over the possibilities. If there were others who knew about the pact, they could be crucial to uncovering the full truth, but finding them wouldn't be easy. She couldn't just send her guards to search for these mysterious allies. She would need to go on her own journey, one that could take her into the very heart of enemy territory. We will need to be careful, the Queen said, her voice low but resolute. I can't risk sending anyone who might not understand the gravity of this. We must move in secret. The soldier gave her a sideways glance. I'm used to working in the shadows, but you'll need to be prepared.
This isn't going to be an easy journey.
The Queen straightened, her eyes flashing with determination.
I've spent my life preparing for challenges. This will be no different.
The soldier didn't reply, but there was a faint trace of respect in his eyes. He had seen her strength in the way she carried herself, and he knew she was more than capable of taking on whatever lay ahead. But even he couldn't deny that what they were about to face would be unlike anything they had ever encountered. The Queen turned to leave, motioning for the soldier to follow. Come with me, she said. We need to make plans, and we need to act fast. As they walked through the corridors of the palace, the Queen couldn't help but feel the weight of the task ahead. This was no longer just about securing her throne. It was about the fate of the galaxy itself. She had learned more in the last few hours than she had in all her years of rule. The tattoo on the soldier's back was more than just a mark of his ancestors. It was a sign that the past could still shape the future. They arrived at a war room, a place where decisions were made with careful thought and swift action. The Queen motioned for the soldier to sit, and she did the same. Together, they began to discuss the next steps. But the tension in the air was palpable. Each word they spoke carried the weight of a decision that could change everything.
We'll need to find out who else knows about the tattoo, the soldier said, his voice steady but his eyes hard. And we'll need to find the right time to act.
These factions won't wait forever.
I'll send out scouts. We'll need to gather intelligence, but we can't afford to let anyone know what we're really after.
They both knew that the time for secrecy was running out. The galaxy was on the brink of a new war, and it was up to them to stop it.
But as they sat there making plans and preparing for the challenges ahead, one thing was certain. They couldn't do it alone. The fate of the galaxy would depend on the choices they made, and the allies they found along the way. The Queen and the soldier moved swiftly through the palace, their minds focused on the task ahead. The weight of their shared secret hung in the air like a storm, waiting to break. As they entered the quiet corridors, the Queen couldn't help but feel the growing urgency. Everything she had worked for, everything her people had fought for, was now at risk. She had never imagined that her reign would face such a challenge. But here she was, standing side by side with a human soldier, one who held the key to a past that could destroy them all. The palace was still as if it, too, understood the gravity of the moment. The flickering lights along the walls cast long shadows, adding to the sense of tension that filled the air. Every step they took seemed heavier than the last, each one bringing them closer to the unknown.
"I'll send scouts to track down any factions that might be aware of the tattoo," the Queen said, breaking the silence as they reached her private chambers. She gestured for the soldier to sit, her voice low but firm.
We cannot afford to make mistakes. One wrong move, and the entire galaxy could fall back into chaos.
The soldier nodded, his gaze unwavering. He understood the Queen's determination. He had seen firsthand what war could do. The soldier had fought in countless battles, and each one had left its mark on him. But this was different. It wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the truth. The factions are not the only threat, the soldier said quietly, his voice steady.
There are those who have been waiting for this moment. They know about the tattoo, even if they don't fully understand its significance. We cannot afford to let them get ahead of us.
The Queen considered his words, her brow furrowed in thought. The soldier was right. They had already made enemies just by uncovering the truth. If word spread, they would have no choice but to face those who had been hiding in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. And once the factions knew about the tattoo, there would be no stopping them. The power it represented was too great.
We need to be smart,
the Queen said, her voice sharp with resolve.
I will trust only a few people to help with this. The fewer who know, the better.
The soldier met her gaze, his expression serious. And what about the others who are like me? The ones who know the truth? Do you have any idea where they might be? The Queen hesitated for a moment. She had heard whispers about others who carried the knowledge of the pact, but those whispers had always been vague, unsubstantiated rumors. She had never imagined that they would actually be able to find these people, much less rely on them. But now, as the soldier sat across from her, she understood the stakes. If there were others who knew the full truth, they might be the key to stopping the factions before it was too late. I have my doubts, the Queen replied, her voice soft but firm. But we cannot afford to wait for them to come to us. If we do not act quickly, we will lose our chance to protect this galaxy.
The soldier's jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides.
Then we will have to find them ourselves.
The Queen nodded. We will need to move carefully.
There are too many eyes watching us. If we make any wrong moves, the factions will find out, and we will be at their mercy.
She stood up and walked to the far side of the room, her mind racing. The Queen had always prided herself on her ability to make quick decisions, but now she found herself second-guessing every choice. The responsibility was immense, and the risks were even greater. She had never imagined that her reign would be challenged in this way, but there was no turning back now. We need a plan, the Queen said, her voice determined.
We need to find those who know the truth, and we need to stop the factions before they can act, and we need to do it without drawing attention.
The soldier stood up and walked to her side, his eyes focused. We'll need to move fast.
I can't promise that we'll be able to do this without being discovered, but I'll do whatever it takes to protect the secret of the tattoo. The Queen turned to face him, her eyes meeting his with a sense of mutual understanding.
I trust you, she said quietly, but we must be cautious.
If we make one mistake, we risk losing everything. They both stood there for a moment, the weight of their words hanging between them. The soldier had known from the start that the journey ahead would be dangerous, but he had never imagined just how much was at stake. They were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the very future of the galaxy. The Queen took a deep breath, her mind already working through the possibilities.
I'll send messages to a few trusted allies. We need to gather information, and we need to make sure the factions don't learn about the tattoo before we're ready.
I'll take care of the rest. We can't afford to wait any longer.
As they began to make plans, the Queen couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away from them. Every moment they wasted brought them closer to discovery, closer to the factions who were already waiting for an opportunity to strike. The tattoo, once a symbol of peace, had become the most sought-after secret in the galaxy. And if they didn't act quickly, it could be the thing that brought everything crashing down. Later that night, the Queen sat alone in her chambers, staring out at the stars. She had always found comfort in the vastness of the universe, in the knowledge that there was so much more to explore, so many secrets waiting to be discovered. But now, as she gazed at the endless expanse before her, she felt nothing but uncertainty. The tattoo on the soldier's back had changed everything. The past was no longer something they could hide from. The truth had surfaced, and with it came the consequences of their actions. The galaxy was teetering on the edge of something far greater than anything she had ever imagined. The Queen stood up and walked to the window, her fingers brushing against the cool glass. She had always believed in the power of diplomacy, in the ability to resolve conflicts without violence. But now, she knew that diplomacy alone would not be enough. The factions would not be swayed by words. They would only respond to strength, to power. And that power, she realized, lay in the tattoo. She turned away from the window, her decision made. It was time to move forward, to take the first step in what would likely be a long and dangerous journey. The soldier had been right. They couldn't afford to wait. The factions were already gathering, their eyes fixed on the tattoo, on the power it held.
And if they didn't act quickly, they would lose everything. The Queen walked out of her chambers, determined and resolute. She would protect the galaxy, no matter the cost. But first, she needed to find the others who knew the truth, and together, they would uncover the full power of the tattoo. It was their only hope. The quiet of the night had settled over the palace, but inside the war room, the air was thick with tension. The Queen paced back and forth, her thoughts spinning faster than the stars outside the window. She had always believed in control, in the delicate balance of power that kept her people safe. But now, with the truth of the tattoo and the factions closing in, everything was unraveling before her eyes. The soldier stood by the large map that covered one wall of the room. His fingers traced the outlines of planets and star systems, each one a potential battleground. His eyes were sharp, focused, yet beneath his calm demeanor, the weight of their mission pressed down on him as much as it did the Queen. He had known war. He had known hardship. But this felt different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight to protect everything that had ever been built. "Are we ready?" the Queen asked, her voice breaking the silence. The soldier turned to face her, his expression unreadable.
"We've done what we can for now. The scouts are in place, and our allies are making their moves. But we both know it won't be enough if we're discovered." The Queen nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the risks. She knew what was at stake. But what frightened her the most wasn't the factions. It wasn't the tattoo or the danger that followed it. It was the uncertainty of what lay ahead. How far would they have to go to stop the factions from exploiting the power of the tattoo? How much would they have to sacrifice in the process? "There's no turning back now," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. "We have to trust that we're doing the right thing." The soldier stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. I trust you, my queen.
But we're not alone in this. We'll need each other every step of the way. The queen looked at him, her eyes locking with his for a moment longer than usual. There was something in his words, something more than just loyalty. It was a shared understanding of the gravity of their situation. He wasn't just a soldier. He wasn't just a man with a past. He was someone who had seen the darkest sides of war and still believed in the possibility of peace. It was why she had come to trust him so completely.
Let's move then,
she said, her voice more resolute than before.
We have no time to waste. They left the war room together, the weight of their mission pressing on them both as they walked through the hallways. The quiet palace, with its marble floors and high ceilings, felt like a faraway place now.
Every step they took was one closer to the unknown, one closer to a confrontation that could change the course of history. There was no room for mistakes. If they failed, the galaxy would fall back into chaos. The Queen's mind raced as they made their way to the transport bay. She knew she had to stay focused, to keep moving forward. But it was hard not to feel the pressure mounting with each passing moment. As they approached the bay, the air was thick with anticipation. Their ship was ready. The engines hummed softly in the background, a reminder that time was running out. The Queen took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. This was it, the final step. They boarded the ship in silence, the soldier taking his position at the controls. The Queen sat beside him, her hands resting on the table in front of her. Her thoughts drifted for a moment to the people she had sworn to protect, to the future that seemed so uncertain. But she pushed those thoughts aside. Now was not the time for doubt. Now was the time for action. The ship lifted off from the palace, breaking free of the planet's atmosphere and heading into the vast unknown. The Queen glanced out the window, watching as the planet grew smaller and smaller until it was nothing more than a distant memory. She had left everything behind for this mission, and she knew there was no going back. She could only hope that the allies they had gathered would be enough. As the ship traveled deeper into space, the soldier worked quietly at the controls, his hands moving with practiced ease. The Queen could see the determination in his eyes, the resolve that had carried him through countless battles. He had never been afraid to fight for what he believed in, and now they would fight together. Hours passed, and as they neared the coordinates where they believed their first ally would be waiting, the Queen felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment they had been preparing for. This was the turning point. The future of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The soldier broke the silence, his voice low.
We're almost there.
Stay alert. This could get dangerous.
The Queen nodded, her hand resting on the side of her seat. She had known danger all her life. She had faced enemies in the courtroom, in politics, and on the battlefield. But this felt different. This wasn't just about protecting her throne. It wasn't just about defending her people. This was about the entire galaxy, about the future of peace, about the truth of the past coming to light. We have to trust in our allies, the Queen said quietly.
We can't do this alone. The soldier nodded.
But we'll make it through. We've come this far together.
They approached the meeting point, a remote station orbiting a desolate planet. The radar picked up a signal, and the soldiers' hands moved quickly across the controls, locking onto the coordinates. They were here. This was the first step in a long journey that could lead them to the answers they desperately needed. As the ship landed softly on the station's landing pad, the Queen stood, straightening her uniform. She knew that whatever happened next, they would be one step closer to uncovering the truth. But even as the doors opened and the cold air of the station rushed in, the Queen could feel the weight of the tattoo on her back, the knowledge that the past had come alive again. The soldier stepped out first, his eyes scanning the surroundings. The Queen followed closely behind, her every sense alert. The station was quiet, the lights dim and flickering. There were no signs of movement, no sound except for the hum of machinery. They moved cautiously through the dark corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. It wasn't until they reached a small, unmarked door that the Queen felt the tension ease slightly. They had arrived at their destination. The soldier knocked softly, his hand resting on the cool metal. A moment later, the door opened, and a figure stepped out. The Queen's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the face. An older man, his eyes sharp and full of wisdom, yet carrying the wear of years of hiding the truth.
"Welcome," the man said, his voice low but welcoming. "I knew you would come." The soldier stepped forward, nodding in respect. "We need your help. We need to find the others." The man looked at the Queen, his gaze piercing, as if reading her soul. "You've uncovered the truth, then," he said, his voice tinged with something that could have been regret. "It's a dangerous path you're on, but you're not the first to seek the answers." The Queen met his gaze, her voice steady. "We have no choice. The factions are closing in, and they won't stop until they control the truth."
The man nodded gravely. "Then let's begin."
"You've come this far, but you'll need more than just me. There are others."
"And we must act before it's too late." With those words, the Queen knew that the real journey was just beginning. The road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they would face it together. The truth would come to light, and with it, the power to shape the future. They had only to trust in each other and the allies they would find along the way.